was it difficult being a man to write stories about women because you don't know the pain?
For parenting tips, celebrity interviews, recipes, conversations with experts, DIYs, and lots more. Subscribe to Kidsstoppress now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to an interesting episode of the Kidsstoppress podcast. Today, we're in conversation with one of my personal favorite authors, one who has broken the dynamics of children's literature and is leading a mission to make mythology relevant and make us start thinking, then start just embracing, and which is something I absolutely love about him. Two of his children's books which have taught me more than I think they've taught my children is The Boys Who Fought and The Girl Who Chose. I am the child who sat every Sunday in front of the TV watching the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, not understanding, not questioning, just absorbing it like a story, which is how it should be in childhood, but never questioned. I was never taught to question that norm, which I did at the age of 35 when I read those two books with my kids. So Devdutt Pattanaik, thank you. Thank you for being here. Why did you decide to write a book that has got a picture that is so weak with stories that are so powerful?
So Savithri is the name of my mother.
I read that.
Yeah. So for me, Savithri and my father, so the feminine influence in my life was my my mother and my father, and I saw their relationship, and we grew up in a family where we didn't think of patriarchy or feminism. We just saw a loving couple struggling with life, raising 3 kids. But then when my sisters got married, I realized what is patriarchy. It was a shock when I saw men not giving access to bank accounts to their wives. That never happened. My mother controlled all the finances in our house. She took all the decisions in our house. My father just trusted her decision. They sort of were great partners. My father wouldn't move. It was a wonderful, we just assumed all men and women have this kind of life. And it was quite a shock. I think the biggest trauma for us was to realize that people are not like that. The world is not like that. And I think our childhood came to an end when my sisters got married, because everything looked different and we were dealing with different kinds of people. And I was very young then. I'm much younger than my sisters. So I was at a formative age.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing this different worlds. And my parents are also not able to understand. They're like, because shouldn't men and women love each other and create a family? And we're seeing these very strange people, the world out there. My father had migrated to Mumbai, lived in Mumbai. So I don't think we were connected with a larger extended Odia family film. And I think, they got married there. My mother was conservative in that way that no, apni jaat mein hi shaadi karna hai. Today I would raise my eyebrows on that. But in those days I just thought that is the way you do things. And I'm like, oh my God, you should have a happy marriage rather than a proper caste marriage.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So these ideas of feminism, patriarchy entered my life. So this is a story which has been about, you can say 40 years in the making. Because when I read the mythology, I saw very different kinds of women. And what I was seeing on television, because that's the time when Ramayana, Mahabharata, we all grew up around that time, right? And I had started reading, and I'm like, there's a dissonance between what I'm seeing on television and what I'm reading. And what Amar Chitrakatha is telling me, what Chandamam is telling me, and I started reading academic books, and I'm like, wait a minute, there's something not connecting the dots. And over the years, I've been asking this question. How do Hindus portray their women? There's no story of Pandora's box. That's from the Greek mythology.
Yes.
You actually create a woman to create misery on human world.
Yes.
That's the Greek idea.
Yeah.
And from those Greek people come Greek philosophers who were raised telling that women create problems. They are the source of all problems. Or the Bible, which talks about Eve, the temptation and the cause. And God very clearly says women are positioned lower than men. These stories don't exist in Hinduism. They don't.
Yeah.
But everybody has kept saying it's patriarchal. And I'm like, it's not very clear. This is very ambiguous. They're not positioning women. And the stories which are positioning women as inferior are legal texts. They are not the stories. These are Manusmriti, which is a legal text, which is now I know written much, much later. And these are men deciding how society should function and obviously going to privilege themselves. But they also talk about women's property rights. If you read Bauddhayana, there are property rights. Who controls the property when a woman gets married? All these questions are discussed. And I realized that people have a very two-dimensional view of womanhood in India. And I thought one day I will write this book. I would see
So it
people...
was brewing you in.
It was brewing and many, many stories. So I had to simplify it. This is a very simplified version of a very complex idea. Tamil stories people don't know. Folk tales I have not covered. There's so many. I've covered a few folk tales. But we only talk about elite women. We only talk about Brahmin women, Kshatriya women. What about a weaver? What about a potter? What about a fisherwoman? What about a hunter? What about a trader? So these are stories that I wanted to... So I brought some of them just so that the young person who reads my book, and mostly I assume that a younger generation will read the book, would get exposed that womanhood is not what is shown on television, not the Saas Bahu serials, not Sanjay Leela Bansali's Hira Mandi, or where you keep wondering, is it a wedding scene or a brothel?
Yeah,
They look
I'm
the
confused.
same. Yeah, the brides look exactly like they dress the same way, they talk the same way, they're all living for men.
Yeah.
They don't seem to be living for themselves.
Yeah.
And I said, but the stories which I was reading was very different. There were women philosophers, there were women traders, there were women fighting, wanting their own husbands. Society was different. There's no monogamy, there is polygamy, there are all kinds. And I thought women should know the stories. People should, not just women, everybody should know these stories.
Yeah, but strange that it may sound, and I'm gonna this part that you've written very beautifully, and this is right at the start of the book, and I love it because it made me think, it made me question. And I'm going to read it out. Tradition is patriarchy. Feminism is modernity. In post-modern mythology, powerful person, privileged, heterosexual, the oppressor, a patron of patriarchy. Is there a way to look at traditional lore with modern or post-modern lens of judgment, presupposing the world to be full of oppressors or the oppressed? Is it possible to find ideas unique to India that are often airbrushed when scholars homogenize universalize the world of patriarchy? Exercise not be seen as being defensive or about the Indian culture? Can both men and women be simply seen as hungry and frightened, coping with the world with life, unable to shed the burden of privilege or culture? You have really forced me to think when you right at the start, because it got me to say that I have never been conditioned or made to ask these sort of questions, right? And when you say that all of these stories that you mentioned, somewhere I felt that we were so progressive in each of these stories, but that doesn't seem to have trickled down to a large part of life today. Like most of the women in these stories, they could choose their own men, but today that's a taboo. They could make they were in leadership roles, but today we're struggling to make seats at the table, right? How did it not trickle down? Where did it get lost in transit?
So, I think it's something to do with colonization, industrialization, how the world functions. And traditionally, in most societies, men went out of the house and women stayed in the house. Not because women were bound to the house, but because once you have to raise children, and remember we're talking of times of high maternal mortality rate, high infant mortality rate, so the children are important, and unfortunately or fortunately, a baby comes out of a woman's body, and therefore her body becomes very important, and therefore her movement is restricted, especially the more privileged you are, the more restricted it is. Because I want the property to go to my son, so all the burden comes on. So once you have, property becoming more and more important, women start losing less and their power. So it's related to property, really, how much you value property. And if you look at our spiritual traditions, they make fun of property. They say that if your identity comes from your property, you're living a lesser life.
Right.
So when I reach my rich friends, and I have tons and tons of Bombay, you live in very good circles, and I'm like, if I look at you because you're rich, That's such a sad thing. I want to
Yeah.
talk to you.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to your wallet.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to your gender. I want to talk to you.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk to you because your God gave you a womb. I mean, is that the reason I'm talking
Yeah.
to you? I'm talking to a person.
Yeah.
And these are dialogues which are there in the Mahabharata, where Sulabha tells Janaka that talk to me, don't talk to my body. Why are you seeing my body? I mean, yeah, I have a body, but we are talking intellectuals.
Right.
And imagine she's telling this to Janak. Janak is considered the wisest, and the kingdom's name is Videha, beyond the body. So she's actually, it's a kind of a satire where
Yeah.
she's saying. But the thing is, we feel, when we read history, history is written by historians.
Yeah.
And historians bring their own prejudice into it.
Right.
Politicians bring their own prejudice into it. Filmmakers bring their own prejudice. And for the last 100 years, we have assumed things about cultures. So those who call themselves modern feminists, they say the tradition was bad. Everything in the past was bad. That's
Correct.
one group of people. There's another group of people who will say that anybody who's rich and privileged is bad. That's postmodern people. And then I realized that especially European and American universities see the world as combat. And they're constantly fighting someone. So the left wing is fighting the right wing. Politicians love fight, right? Because then you become a victor and everybody loves winning. And it's sort of, we have gamified our life. We have gamified our culture. And we start looking, when people talk about Ramayana, they look at the battle scene. And say the battle scene is one part of the story. There is so much more happening in the Ramayana.
yeah.
Mahabharata, they'll say war ke bare mein. I said the war ends in the 12th chapter. There are 6 chapters after the war.
Right.
But when the TV serial showed Mahabharata, they ended with the war.
Yeah.
They didn't show the remaining 6 chapters. And of course, they'll say, no, we didn't get money for it, funding for it. I said, no, you were dishonest. You wanted to show the triumph of the Pandavas are good and the Kauravas are bad, and you were lazy. You don't, because you want your audience to feel, Arey wah, kya maja aa gaya. And you want to turn everything into an IPL match where there's a winner and a loser. You want everything to be cricket. And that's a lazy way of thinking. And I don't want to be lazy. I don't want my readers to be lazy. I don't write for lazy people. I write for people who are alert and want to have a good life and be happy with whether they're men, women, gay, straight, doesn't matter. Children. I want them to be recognize that do not get fooled by what a storyteller is telling you. So more than the story, I focus on the storyteller.
Yeah.
I don't say it explicitly, but the storyteller has got his own agenda. I have also my own agenda.
Yeah.
And my agenda is the life is beautiful, life is wonderful. And in the Sati Savithri book, gender is, you are a soul wrapped in a gendered body. And the soul is more important. And I want to talk to that soul with a gendered body. Yes, there is a gendered body. I cannot deny the fact that I have a male body, or I have a body which doesn't have 6-pack abs, and I have a short body. I wish I was tall, like a Scandinavian. I don't have it, but I have to live with that body. But I'm the soul at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And you are a soul at the end of the day. And we're having a conversation.
Yeah.
And I would like to have that conversation to be rich. And my reader, or my listener in this case, is a soul with a gendered body, maybe a privileged body, may not be a privileged body, doesn't matter. Talk to that soul, because then your life will be wonderful. Then the life will be fabulous. Right. And that's, every book of mine strives to do that.
Right. I don't know if I read it in the book or in one of your interviews where somebody asked you that, was it difficult being a man to write stories about women because you don't know the pain and you don't carry the womb we carry.
Yeah.
So was it?
The Pregnant King, when I was writing, there was where I was trying to describe labor. And more than labor, it was menstruation. I wanted to talk about menstruation, and I went to my sister and said, "What happens to your body?" And she was like, "How can you talk to me like that? You don't talk like that, do you?" And I'm a doctor, so I'm familiar with the everything theory, but not the experience.
Yeah.
And then I realized, how different it is when you occupy a different body, But even then it's complex, because all women don't menstruate exactly the same way. Some have painful, some don't have pain. And I said, you can't make universal sentences. Even a woman can't say that. Some will have difficult pregnancies, some have easy pregnancies, some can deliver baby at home without any effort, some have to go through all kinds of hormonal medical processes. So our bodies are a different world we inhabit.
Right.
And my body is different from your body. all men's bodies are not the same.
Yeah.
And then you realize how lonely our lives are, each one of us. And when you start writing these stories, you realize, and I wanted to bring that loneliness of the pregnant man, because he doesn't even have someone to talk to.
Yeah.
So that was when I wrote the book, and I think that's one of the early books where gender became an important part of my conversation. When people talk about mythology, you have to talk about. We don't talk much about gender. It's
Yeah.
like hero,
Yeah.
heroine, villain. I mean, when I say hero and heroine, there's a visual coming in my mind. Villain, victim, something is coming. But stories, that's Greek way of storytelling. Indian storytelling is ras, bhav, emotions, sentiment. आपको क्या अनुभव हो रहा है? So experience, what is Ram going through when he discovers his wife is abducted? What does it mean? And when you read the various poetry, it's about Ram weeping like a baby, and he curses plants and animals, and there are lots of folk tales about different plants and animals. He goes and asks, have you seen Sita? Have you seen Sita? Some answer, some don't, some make fun of him, and each time he reacts differently.
Right.
Now these stories are not told. That's not what the TV serials are going to show,
Yeah.
because you want to show Ram as some warrior god with six-pack abs holding weapons in his hand. You don't want to show a man who's weeping. Where's my wife? Has she abandoned me? Has she left me? Because he doesn't know Ravan has abducted her. So what is he going through? Has she got tired of me because I brought her into the jungle? And the dialogues are there, where he says, she's a princess. She married into a royal family. Now we're in the middle of the forest, and she's foraging for food. Maybe she got tired of me. So the self-doubt. Now these are stories which are there, but why don't we tell our children those stories?
Yeah.
That people feel. So
Because that's never been portrayed traditionally.
no, that's also because the storyteller has an agenda.
Yes.
And the storyteller wants you to say that, men don't feel. Men are not supposed to feel pain. Men are not supposed to feel heartbreak. So the story of Sita is as much about Ram's heartbreak and longing and loss. And if you look at Ramayana carefully, it's a story of a man who is never allowed to be with his wife.
Yeah.
It's the story, Kaikai is saying, you go to the forest.
Yeah.
Then Ravan abducts her. And then the people gossip about her. And they're never allowed to stay together. It's a relationship and now it becomes a love story of people trying to come together and society is pulling them apart.
Yeah.
It's not the Ram of the politician. It's a different Ram. Why is the politician's Ram more important than a lover's Ram, a beloved's Ram? A husband-wife story struggling with difficult issues, politics. They're royal families. They're political. They're dealing with difficult people. So there are other women in the story. There's Surpanakha. There's Mandodari. So when I'm writing a Sati Savithri, I want to talk about the women they meet in the forest, the women she meets in the choices she makes, her agency. And many years ago I was dealing with a TV channel, and we had a workshop, and the women said, we love Draupadi. So I said, why do you like Draupadi? And they said, oh, she's so dramatic, the hair khulke, she asked for the blood. So I asked one question. So I said, whose children become king? Draupadi's or Sita's? And then they said, Draupadi's children died. I said, yes. And Sita's children? I said, they became kings. So I said, who's the smart woman? Who got her way? And then the room went quiet. I said, can you just start looking at life differently? Because one woman had 5 sons, and for her revenge, she ended up killing the 5. One woman was kicked out of the house brutally, but her children came and took the jaidad uska.
But Devdutt, she had to sacrifice for it.
She didn't have to, she was kicked out, she had no choice.
Yeah, but I'm saying she had her sons, right? And she chose for them to, even at the end, if you look at the victory was that her sons became king, but she didn't have anything. So you are talking of women again being martyrs in the process.
Think about it. If you live in the palace, you have to follow all the palace rules.
Yeah.
You have to deal with all those
Are you going to
satans.
say that she was finally
I think she
liberated
was
living?
liberated in the jungle. She could do whatever she wanted. She was like, "Bas ho gaya ye sab," and she just went to some underground club
Which is what we call a girls' trip now.
So she went out,
She
and
went on it.
and she just went into the underground. She went like into some Naglok or something.
But I
and-
just feel that the tolerance that was shown against. Sorry, I'm interrupting.
no. I'm just saying that it's how we tell the story.
But you're looking at a very bright side.
I always want to look at the bright side.
Yeah, I agree. But I am saying that I am a woman who wants to have my kids have the kingdom and want to live in the palace and want all
But
of
life
it together.
is not like that, right? That's what the story is telling you. The life, you don't choose your life. You choose things, and things, mess happens. Draupadi, marries a rich family. I mean, actually, she doesn't marry a rich man. She marries a poor Brahmin
Yeah.
who turns out to say that, okay, now you have to marry all my brothers, and then they all turn out to be Pandavas.
Yeah.
So she married a poor Brahmin who was very good in archery. She didn't expect suddenly from one poor, she thought I'm going to live in a poor family all my life.
Yeah.
Suddenly she said, oh, I'm going to have 5 husbands. Now they turn out to be kings. And the story just changes. And,
Yeah.
see a roller coaster ride happening. And she wants certain things and they give her certain things. That has consequences. So we are all living lives with limitations. Nobody in this world has no limitations. The way we are told, we are told constantly you are a victim. Like I always tell people, I go to the richest households, I hear people telling me we are victims. You go to the poorest households, we are victims. So I said, ये victim
कौन है?
operating system कहाँ से आया? It's an operating system. We have downloaded this operating system through our schools, our education, our entertainment. All this is putting in our head this very miserable understanding of the world. And the stories really are not telling you that. The stories are, like when the Buddha story is about life is suffering. I mean, he begins the story by life is suffering. सब कुछ छोड़ दो, फिर तुम बुद्ध बनोगे. Then give up everything. Then how do we live our lives?
Yeah.
And Ramayana and Mahabharata is saying, no, life is not suffering. Life is going through these experiences.
Yeah.
You have to go through bad people, good people, horrible people, nice people. And the story, one of the factors is gender.
Yeah.
Then there is wealth, there is power, there is knowledge. You have to deal with so many things with our lives. So gender is one part. We give it, when you talk to feminists, they will say that's the most important part. You talk to a Marxist, he'll say money is the most important part. You talk to politicians, they'll say power is the most important part. Everything is important.
Correct.
Looks, you can be male but physically ugly. You could be male and born in a poor family. It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
Right? So society doesn't privilege all men. Society doesn't privilege all women. Draupadi rejects Karna because he's from a lower caste. So all men are not the same.
Yeah.
So there are these, which is what I want to draw attention to.
Yeah.
What about the Harappan women, in Harappan societies? How are they different? Do you know the stories of the Harappan women? Nobody tells us that.
Yeah.
Nobody talks about Harappan women and the fact that, they invented the bangle.
Yeah.
Bangles came to India from Harappa. Nowhere else in the world you find bangles. You find them in Harappa. Yeah. Who invented them? Why would men invent them? No, they are not interested. They were merchants. They were traveling all over the place. It's the women who invented them. So for me, that's interesting. Look at the old Harappan statue of the girl, the way she's standing. Or all those bejeweled women. They're all bejeweled women. And there is no indicator that they were married. There is no proof that they were married. We're assuming they were married. There is no data. We have no information whether it was a mercantile society, matriarchal society, patriarchal. We don't know anything. All we suspect is there is the images where women are fighting tigers. She's a half tiger. She's standing in the middle of a tree, worshipped by men, and there is one woman stopping 2 men from fighting.
Right.
These are the only images of women I have. And there are lots of images of bejeweled women. Now, is she oppressed? Is she the oppressor? Who is she? We don't know, but can I imagine? Can I sit with my daughter and son and imagine? Let's imagine what these girls were doing.
Right.
There are no weapons in Harappa, so they were obviously not warriors. They built cities. Who built those bricks? Why do we assume men made the bricks? Women could have made the bricks. Anybody can make a brick. It's not a big deal. But we have been conditioned to think men do it. And that's how we talk to children. We have to tell children to imagine things differently. Don't accept the story that has been told to you by the storyteller who has an agenda.
Right.
Every storyteller has an agenda. You see the story, hear it, and say, okay, this makes sense, this doesn't make sense, and then now create your own story. For me, when Sita is sent to the forest, everybody, I'll give you an example in Marathi Geet Ramayan. When Marathi Geet Ramayan was written about 50 years ago in All India Radio, and it's a beautiful, you should read it, it's beautiful songs and considered a masterpiece in literature and music. When you read Ram talking, when he's kicked out of the palace and everybody's cursing Kaikai, he gives this very big philosophical speech that, life is, nobody's bad, nobody's good, everything is wonderful. And you have to accept life for what it is. It has a lot of challenges, but don't hate people. Now, this is Ram's poetry at the beginning. In the end, when Sita is kicked out, she says, "Hi, meri kismat kitni buri hai." Why is she not saying the same dialogue as Ram? She could have also said, there's no good people, there are not bad people, this is life, there are fate, and she could be philosophical. But the poet has decided men are philosophers, not women. She's Janak's daughter. She's the daughter of the greatest philosopher in India.
Yeah.
So she came from a family where Dashrath produces 4 sons. She's an adopted child by a king who has 4 daughters. So 4 sons, 4 daughters. Is Valmiki trying to communicate something? That the kingdom of Videha has 4 princesses. Gender doesn't matter. Videha. The Deha doesn't matter.
Yeah.
While Dashrath's world is where sons matter. Is it a commentary on a patriarchal and a far more egalitarian family? Can I look at it that way? Why is a 20th century poet writing as a woman? Because in his view, that's how he sees his mother. That's how he sees his sister. He is not even imagining an alternative because there is a performance for women. Women supposed to not be philosophical. She can't say that, oh, life is tough. People are stupid. We have to deal with difficult things. She could have sung a song like that. But no, she sings, Ram abandoned me.
But that's where she's always playing the victim card. She's always the one which I wanted to share, that I thought that she was always someone who has to constantly prove herself. Sita had to prove herself. Then when we're talking about the other two people that I mentioned, which is, Vrinda or Anusuya, where her husband came back because he thought he was incompetent. She left the kingdom for him. She went with him to to the forest, and when she came back and he was a cook in the thing, she had to again prove that yes, it is my love for you, and that is why the way you look did not matter. Why are we as women constantly proving ourselves back then, proving ourselves back even today?
So the women are not saying anything. It's the storyteller who has decided the women should look like that.
When can we start taking control of our narrative?
Write your own stories. But if you will repeat the same template, it's quite possible, because a book becomes a hit when you show women in a sad situation.
Yeah.
You show powerful women, the book won't be a hit. Every filmmaker in India knows that. Show the woman miserable and audiences love it. Make her cry and show a man saving her, and the ratings will go up and your story perpetuates. You keep giving the audience what they want because they're used to that same khana. And therefore you want your bahu to behave in a particular way, you want your daughters to behave in a particular way. You shop. They say that we are reimagining the world, but you're not reimagining your own life, because look at Damayanti's story. Look at the way you saw it and the way I saw it. I saw a woman who was very beautiful, a man who is very handsome. That's the story. They get married and very bad things happen. He loses his self-confidence and she pulls him out of it. She's not following him and she's taking charge. She has agency. He runs away from her saying that you marry someone else. I'm not good enough for you. He's lost his self. It's the first case of depression, by the way, in Mahabharata. It's the first case of a man going through depression that is shown. It is documented. Nala Damayanti's story is a story of a man going through depression. Now, as a wife, she could have just remarried another man. In fact, where he was working as a cook, that king wanted to marry. Everybody wanted to marry her. Remember, this is a society where women were allowed to remarry. So she could have easily remarried someone saying, there's a loser, khatam ho gaya, I'll marry someone else. But she says, I love him and I want him to come out of this depression. And she finds him. So here is a woman who finds a husband. She could easily have divorced him. She chose not to divorce. Now, is that weakness? Of course, if you give it to a Bollywood film star, they say, dekho kitni patni vrata hai. And they'll turn it into kind of a victimhood because मैं अपने पति को नहीं छोड़ सकती. She says, I just love him. I like him. Is a woman allowed to like a husband or love a husband, or is she bound by her Mangal Sutra to do it? It depends on if Bollywood film writers will say Mangal Sutra hi hai. Now that's a Bollywood because they themselves have bad marriages.
Yeah.
You know, when you have a good marriage, you realize Mangal Sutra doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's a good marriage person will never care for Mangal
I'm just
Sutra.
trying to think about it because I don't know where mine is. Sorry.
You know, see, when you start, your relationship is based on a crutch like an object, then it's obviously not a good relationship. I mean, that's nice to have symbols and to go through ceremonies, but a good marriage is not a huge wedding party, right? A good marriage is a relationship between the man and woman in their privacy.
Yeah.
And are they friends? Are they partners? You can have the most expensive wedding in the world, but that doesn't make a good marriage.
Yeah.
Anybody with half a brain knows it. How difficult marriage is. Every day is work. Every minute is work. And it is not because, you know, somebody spends $1 million on the wedding.
So do you think women, through the stories, and this is what I think, are far more tenacious, far resilient sometimes to make it work, to make things happen?
See, one could say it's a gendered thing or not. We do feel, I mean, it's an argument that some people don't like, but I think the genders privilege certain emotions over others. So if there is a particular tenacity is usually seen in the female gender. The man gives up easily, and the tenaciousness is difficult to cling on, to be what is in Marathi called a ghorpad, to be the cloy person who holds on. So that's why you have a partnership. A marriage is a partnership because you bring two different energies into the room. If one has a particular energy, you better have a complementary energy. Yeah, you don't have to have the same energy. And, that is important. So that complementary nature of a relationship is important. And that is, I think, what Nala Damayanti is showing. Like Sati Savithri, the word Sati is a good wife who complements. And in fact, Mahabharata, there is this whole story of Sati Savithri, Sati Damayanti is told to Yudhishthira by being told that, you know what, your success depends on who you marry. It all depends on who you marry. If you don't have the right wife, and that's why Draupadi is most important, because she protected you from being because you were a gambling addict. She's the one who's going to save you. She's the one going to save you. So they're very clear in their storytelling that without a wife, you won't. Now, that's what the rishis are telling. And in the forest, all the rishis have wives who are very powerful. And it's not that they're saying that it's a partnership. If I don't get the right wife, I will not be able to do my yajna. I need a right wife. And the wives are told, if I don't get the right husband, I won't be able to live the kind of life I want.
The right partnership.
Partnership is important. And if you get a wrong partnership, how do you compensate? How do you figure out a way? So when you read the Kama Sutra, it talks the same thing. How do you deal with incompatibility in your relationship? So Kama Sutra is completely that. It's all about, because we don't choose our partners, right? Sometimes for various reasons we marry, and especially royal families, political decisions, alliances. How do you live? How does Anasuya live with Atreya? How does Lopamudra, who is a princess, marries Agastya Muni, who is not a good-looking man, but he's a priest, and she says, okay, fine, I'll give you. You are marrying me only because you want babies. You don't want to marry me. Okay, cool. She'll negotiate. She says, give me a home which is worthy of your mother's children. And now he has to go and work. And he has to find jobs. He has to make money. She says, you want babies, right? I'll give you the babies. But give me a home which is worthy of your children's mother. So see, she's negotiating. Or when you read Mahabharata, Satyavati negotiates what she wants from Shantanu. Ganga negotiates. You want to marry me? Give me freedom after marriage. What is the freedom? She kills babies. Is it abortion? She's saying, I don't want to have babies. Will you allow me to live my life? And he says, yes. He agrees to give her freedom after marriage. But she decides to kill the babies. And then he's like, oh, that's a bit much. I can't handle that. And she said, then I don't want to be with you. And she walks away. That's the first chapter of the Mahabharata. But it's there in the television serial. But I've not seen people talking about it. What does Ganga embody? They'll say, oh, Devi hai wo. That's why she's allowed to do it. And therefore, it's very cleverly told that it's not meant for normal women. But we are all goddesses, right? We are all told, in our pujas, we are told a woman is a goddess.
Tell me, why has that negotiation, and then today when we say women are not great negotiators?
It's because that's a story the storyteller is telling us. He's convincing us. He's giving us the drugs. We are all being drugged by our storytellers to, it's what people do in parties, right? They give girls alcohol so that the girl becomes accessible.
Yeah.
And that's what storyteller does. It tells you, if the story doesn't empower you, then it's, I'm writing mythology. I'm telling you what the ancestors are telling you. And I don't look at one story, therefore. I look at multiple
Yes.
stories.
Yes.
Because one story can be like, okay, Devdutt, ye tumhara
Yeah.
point of view hai.
Correct.
And I can, but when I'm looking at multiple stories, I'm seeing patterns. Why is there no Pandora? Why is there no Eve? There is no Lopamudra in the Bible. There is no Anasuya in the Bible. There's no Ganga in the Bible. There's no Satyavati in the Bible. I don't see these stories in Greek mythology. I don't see this in Western traditions.
Right.
Arthur's Camelot does not have these women. But they are not told. They are not told globally. We are just the painted brush. You see Japanese stories, Chinese stories, you don't find these kind of women. You don't find these women coming out of the earth, and you don't have Meenakshi riding up to the north and selecting a husband.
Yeah.
You don't have Ari and Amazon women. You don't have these stories. You don't have stories of women with 5 husbands. You don't have these stories. They're there only in South Asia. They're the Buddhist stories. If you read the Buddhist Jataka stories, everybody tells what Jatakas are children's stories.
Yeah.
There are about 10% of stories about women having all kinds of sexual activities.
Yeah.
It's scary. It's like basically they're telling the monks that, oh, women have great sexual appetite. That's why run away from them.
Yeah.
Imagine a story told like that, where women are seen as sexual aggressive and men should protect themselves from aggressive women. They're actually that don't walk uncovering your chest because women will attack you. It sounds, do you realize there's actually lines in the Vinaya Pitaka which tells the male monk, kapde pehen ke jana bahar. Because the women will find you attractive and they will come after you. That's a very different way of, I'm not making it up. This is the Vinaya Pitaka. There are Jataka tales, Konala Jataka is full of women. The king is walking one day, comes and sees his queen seducing a rishi and says, oh, that's the way women are. He's not getting angry. He's like, oh, women are like that only. Or you have a story of a father-in-law walking in and seeing his daughter-in-law with another man. He gets angry with the man, not with the daughter-in-law. And he kills the man, saying that, why are you violating her? He's not telling any, there is no condemnation of the daughter-in-law. But today's Bollywood feminist producer
Has just flipped it over.
yes, because they will, and if I show this story, I've worked with them, they will say, sir, ye nahi chalega. So I saw the manipulations that were happening. This is how manipulation happens. And I'm talking about women directors in positions of power telling me that a feminist story won't work. And then going on interviews and saying that, women empowerment. I said, you were in a position of power.
Yeah.
So don't say, oh, I'm part of the system.
Yeah.
But, these stories exist. And I'm not saying the other stories don't exist, but I'm giving alternatives.
Right. But tell me, when we are looking at, has somewhere the tolerance or the forgiveness, when Sita made a mistake, she was still up there. She was allowed to make mistakes. Versus when women make mistakes today, right? Or the choice of you could have a child with this one, the river, anybody. Versus today when we're talking of different ways of having children, different mediums of having children, we are always, and I hate to say this, I know I've got my answer, we're not supposed to play a victim card. But why does society make it less forgiving for us? Why did that not
It's about
trickle down?
control. How do you control your child, male or female? When they make a mistake, you get angry. Think about it. As a parent, how do parents deal with their children? What happens when the child makes a mistake? How do they deal with the situation when the child makes the mistake? Don't think gender. Just think, how do you deal with it? Because what is a mistake? It's an opportunity to learn what doesn't work. That's all it is. But because you want life to be in a particular way, you torment people and torture people to get them to behave in a particular way. That's how we train dogs, right? You train a dog by reward and punishment constantly. And we start thinking of our children as animals to be domesticated. And when there's no mistake in this world. There are just choices which work out and which don't work out. And you want to have a sexual activity. So, for example, Kunti chooses, she's given a boon and she chooses something, she becomes pregnant. And she's like, oh, what do I do with it now? She doesn't know what to do with this child. And so she says, I don't want my reputation to get stained. And she abandons the child. Now, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Now, I remember my friend telling me the story that she was telling the story to her nephew. And she said, accidentally, the baby was abandoned to the river on the basket. And the child looked at, my friend's nephew told her that, why are you telling me a lie? I know she willingly gave up the child. The child had no problem listening to the idea. So it's a great opportunity to ask that, why was she guilty?
Yeah.
Why do you think, did she do right, wrong? What do you think? What do you feel?
Yeah.
And then the child will emerge. There is no right and wrong as such in these stories. At the end of the day, Draupadi is sent to Naraka. And if you see the reason given for her to be in Narak, when Yudhishthira goes to Narak and he sees Draupadi, he says, what did she do wrong? She was such a nice wife. He says she favored Arjun over others. As a wife of 5 men, she should have been given 20% love to each one. But she had a favorite and therefore she's in Narak. Think of this concept. If you have 5 husbands, you have to give them 20% chance. I mean, which 21st century woman can think of this idea which is there in the Mahabharata, written 1800 years ago? But why is it not highlighted? I see feminist writers writing on Draupadi, they never talk about her sex life.
Yeah.
Because they're embarrassed themselves. Because how? Woman with 5... You see... Because men become competitive, right?
Yeah.
And all the brothers would start competing with each other as who does she prefer? Who is the better lover? Whose desire does she... whose touch does she long for? Now, those are great stories, right? So I always ask people, so tell me about it. And then they'll just go quiet. I said, because you have to think, right? And that's scary because we have been conditioned. You don't find it's a problem when I talk about Krishna's 8 wives.
Yeah.
You're perfectly fine imagining with him 8 wives. But the moment I say Draupadi has 5 husbands, it discomforts you. That's conditioning.
Right.
You're conditioned. And it's not the way the world is. Your ancestors told you both the stories. You chose not to listen to them carefully, explore them, build on them. These are your ancestors. Vyasa is my ancestor and your ancestors. Valmiki is my ancestor and your ancestor. They wrote these stories. We both inherited it. But read them. Everybody says, I remember whenever I give an awkward sentence, some troll will say, original dikhao. I said, original dikhaunga to dar jaoge. Because it will scare you so much if I show you paragraphs from the Rig Veda that somebody told me, this is no original. I said, shall I read paragraph number this? And he knew what the paragraph was. He said, don't. I said, no, let's Google it. Let's Google it. And I was in a classroom and I got it flashed in front of everyone. And I gave 3 translations. I said, I don't know Sanskrit. Let's do 3 translations. Between them, how much difference is there between these 3 translations? And the girls were shocked at the conversation between Indrani and Indra and Virkshakapi. And they were like, what is this? We can't believe this is there. I said, what does it mean? I said, I don't know what it means. This was written 3,500 years ago. But it was written. Somebody wrote it. Now you discuss, figure it out. And the gentleman who asked the question was like regretting it because I was like, be careful. Our ancestors were wiser. They did not have your prejudices.
Yeah.
Grow up. Don't think Bollywood producers and directors are wise or Delhi politicians are wise. They are all greedy, hungry, like you and me.
Yeah.
And they're scrounging for power. And storytellers are also doing that.
Yeah.
But, maybe I have the privilege of telling you the story which nobody else is telling you. That's why it is the feminist stories that they don't tell you. Because I know these stories are not told to people. I feel so sad when I see boys and girls who don't know these beautiful stories that will make them proud Indians, if you want to be a proud Indian, or just happy person, just be happy.
Right.
I don't want to say, oh, wo mar gayi, pani mein. Like somebody, Sita committed a suicide. I said, how did you come to the conclusion?
Yeah.
And she said, no, because, she went under the earth, so she must have come. I said, no, she went to a nightclub. I said, why is your imagination better than mine? Your imagination makes you feel miserable. My imagination makes cool. Because my sisters never went to nightclubs. They would have been shocked. But I remember when I took my sisters once to a nightclub, I said, come, let's have beer. They didn't have it, but they were so happy. Because it meant that I was not judging them.
Yeah.
They didn't want to have the beer and whatever conditioning was there. I had no problems. But the fact that they had a brother who said, have a beer,
Yeah.
have an affair. How can you say such a thing? I said, because I can say such a thing. I mean, good, bad, I don't know. It has consequences.
Yeah. I want to know what happened after when you took them took them home.
It was this funny thing because their mind told them that not everybody in the world needs to judge them.
Right.
They don't live in a world of judgment. Don't get trapped in this world. There are alternate worlds out there. And hopefully your partners, and therefore they raised children who were more open.
Right.
So I see how my sisters talk to my nephews. They want to have live-in relationships. I'm like, are you sure of the consequence? Are you ready? Are you willing to take the responsibility? Because it's a girl in our society, whether we like it or not, a girl's choices are different from boys' choices.
Yeah.
I said, have this conversation with the girl. And then, that's the generation shift that happens.
Right.
And when they're talking to their, prospective daughters-in-law, may not be a daughter-in-law, it's a different conversation they're having. And I think that's important, that, we love you anyway, whatever decisions you take, be careful of these choices because, we don't live in a society that is sometimes kind. Maybe Bombay gives you privilege of many more privileges than, say, a Bhopal would or a Ghaziabad would. So careful with these choices. Yeah. And I think that helps. That's what generation shift is about. Ultimately, emotionally, are we more open? Are we more comfortable? I don't like stories. That's why I wrote the feminist stories we don't tell you. For me, it's not about women are weak or women are strong. It's about looking at women as people.
Yeah.
For me, that's feminism.
And you've also spoken about how they're empowering. They are making decisions where you've written, they also point out flaws. They also tell you where you're making mistakes. Or they also, I think, was it the story with Indra where she says that she actually points out the flaws, that this is the mistake that you're making. And we're not only playing a bystander's role where we're just saying we're just equals in frame. We're actually...
See, it's about discovering that we are both going through life and we both are working... See, when any partnership or any friendship or anything, we all make mistakes. So it's looking at a woman... It's not like one is ordering, the other is following, which is how the Western narratives are. One walks in front, one walks behind. It is about... When you make a mistake, I'm there. When I make a mistake, you are there. And that's what creates partnership. The word for it is dampatya. Dama is the home. So they looked at male-female relationship in the concept of home, but they also talked about people who were single. Right. And they also talked about courtesans.
Yeah.
So women who had many lovers and had no husbands, they were allowed not to have husbands. Until 1857, this practice existed, by the way, in our country. A whole bunch of women who were told, no, you don't have to marry. It's okay. But it's caste thing also. It's your caste.
Yeah.
So these things that a woman is not seen in a single mold is, I think, the key message. There is a multiple ways of looking at it. And I think that's what I want to draw attention. That's why I've spoken about women's desires, even women's negotiating skills. So there's one chapter on she likes men. So Usha, the Asura woman, kidnaps a guy.
Yeah.
So how many stories have you seen of a woman going and kidnapping a guy and then the father finding them and throwing them in jail and then Krishna coming to liberate them and saying love is more important. That's the story's message, that, it's love is more important. And a woman kidnaps a boy. So you have a woman's desire being discussed. You have women negotiating for power. You have Sita and Draupadi being compared. So the idea is to break this, what is mythology? Because, you see in the Bollywood version of feminism, if a woman holds a sword in her hand or a gun in her hand, she's feminist.
Yeah.
Right? And after she gets
she
married,
fights for herself.
No.
Or for her rights, she's a feminist.
She fights only before marriage. So you'll always have all these shows where the queen will have a sword in her hand, and after she gets married, she gives up the sword.
Yeah.
Because, man
Or
has
she
come
gets it back when she becomes a grandmother.
mother. Then she's protected. So it's like this role.
Yeah.
She's a mother hen who's taking care of her
Yeah.
chicks. But swords don't make you a feminist.
Yeah.
Because you're still following what the man's gaze.
Yeah.
You do what you do. You. I think the Gen Z comes up with these lovely lines. You do you. I do me. And I
Yeah.
think this book is about the girls saying you do you.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. Sati is like telling her father, I do me, you do you. I'll marry the man I want. If he's going to die in 1 year's time, cool, I'll manage it. So she's not even afraid of death.
Yeah.
Everybody else is afraid of death, but she's not afraid of death. She gets her husband
And she
back.
she has resilience, and she's also okay with bearing the consequences of her choices.
Her choices, because she can always say, oh, he's going to die in 1 year.
Yeah.
I don't want to marry. Or Sita is at no point does Sita look at Ravan and say, you're a bad guy. She's just disappointed with him. That you're such an intelligent, educated man. Why are you... don't you understand consent?
Yeah. True.
Like everybody... I remember this young man telling me, Devdutt, but I think Ravan was a great guy. I said, why? He's educated and he's Shiv Bhakt. I said, but he doesn't understand consent. Then he couldn't understand it. I said, because you don't understand consent. That you don't understand that Valmiki Ramayana is about consent.
Yeah.
2000 years ago, there's an epic which talks about consent. Surpanakha comes to Ram and Ram does not give her consent.
Yeah.
But she persists. Sita doesn't give consent, but Ravan. So this brother-sister, Ravan and Shurpanakha, don't understand consent.
True.
So you can't say that, I'll glamorize, Surpanakha is a feminist. No, she's not. She doesn't understand consent. And Ravan is definitely not a Shiv Bhakt, because what Vedic knowledge does he have when he doesn't understand consent?
But it's also about his ego. Where
It is.
ego precedes knowledge.
See, once ego comes in, consent doesn't, then it's my way or the highway. Right? What is consent?
Yeah.
Consent is respecting the person in front of you. Ram is asking that, I'm not interested. I don't give consent.
Right.
That violation is not correct. He's also saying no. Sita is also saying no. So it's really gender neutral.
Right.
If you look at it, Ramayana is gender neutral in matters of consent. It's not saying... So when we talk of Me Too movement, it is gender neutral.
Yeah.
Anybody in a position of power can abuse their power. And I think that movement was important because I would, in my offices, I would say, see, it's about power. We should be very aware that in a position of power, you can be attracted to someone.
Yeah.
But you are in a position of power. They don't, it's not an equal thing.
Yeah.
So then it makes you think about consent, about power. Ramayana makes you think about it. But you see, tell me one of those, I'm sorry I make fun of Bollywood producers, but I mean generally, or one of those people who are giving those satsangs and giving those long lectures on Ramayana, they never talk about consent.
Yeah.
They only talk bhakti, 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 bhakti. I was like, that's one masala, yeah. There are 20 masalas in the room.
Yeah.
But then my friend said, the 19 masalas we'll get from Devdutt's books. So
But I have to ask you this. Coming back, Devdutt, any stories from Sati Savithri which you feel, from a mother's point of view, who continuously goes through that guilt of not being good enough, not doing enough, feeling guilty about her pleasures, her joys, her progress, and deprioritizing the child. We're constantly made to feel that. So any stories from there which kind of puts her in the forefront?
So the Apsaras don't care for their babies. They just abandon them in the forest floor and walk away.
Yeah.
So let's take the famous story of Shakuntala.
Yeah.
You've heard the story of Menaka seducing Vishwamitra.
Yeah.
And we're like, it's all about the men. And, Vishwamitra got seduced. What we forget is after the baby is born, Menaka doesn't take care of the child. She just leaves the child on the forest floor to be pecked by the Shakun birds. That's why it's called Shakuntala. So the birds come to eat the baby. Of course, the poet Kalidas will say they were sheltering her from the heat. They were basically vultures coming to eat the baby. And then Kanv, a man, finds the abandoned baby and chooses to raise her as his daughter. Do you see how modern this story is?
Yes.
It's a woman who seduces a man, throws the baby away, and goes away. The man refuses to take care of the baby. He also goes away. And a third man walks into the room. The second man walks into the room, sees this poor girl, on the forest floor and raises his own. So now it's subverting everything, right? A woman who doesn't care for her daughter, a man who takes care of a child who is not of his own body. So maternal instincts are coming not in a man, not in a woman, but a man. Now this is a popular story. Shakuntala Menaka's story is known to all of us, but we don't tell the story this way. But the story is there in the Mahabharata. Menaka walks away from her children, Shakuntala, from her daughter. Look at the story when you read about Kripa and Kripi. These are two characters in the Mahabharata. Shantanu is walking in the forest when he finds two babies in the forest abandoned. And he says, oh, this must be the child of an Apsara and a Rishi. Because Apsaras don't take care of their children. So there's a whole category of women
But
seen
they're
as...
not the most rewarded.
Of course, because they're free. How will you... No man likes a free woman who says, I don't really care for you. And I don't care for the babies that are produced. Because she doesn't care. It's okay. But these characters exist.
She's not the most respected then.
Obviously, we'll respect people who give up their freedom. जो रोने वाली है, मंगलसूत्र वाली, मेरे चुटकी भर सिंदूर के लिए. She'll become the India's most famous heroine, ratings very high. The moment she says, very rarely will you have a character. I think now there's a character called Anupama, right?
Yeah.
Who sort of, my friend said she just goes around the world doing whatever she wants to do.
Yeah.
That tells you a lot, right? In 20 years, India has changed from, everything is about the sindoor. She still gives the same dialogue, but she's having a lot of husbands. And I think, I don't know whether she'll be called an Apsara, but she's playing the game.
Yeah.
And you play the system. So the Apsaras exist. And every temple has images of Apsaras. Every temple has images of Apsaras. Obviously, you think men who talk about celibacy will like an Apsara.
But then women want to conform.
Some women want to conform because when
they want to be respected. So in each of these stories,
you have to give up something in life. You can't get everything. You have to decide what you want in life. Do you want freedom or do you want submission? Everything has consequences. Sita didn't have to go to the forest. But in the forest, there are horrible people who can abduct you. So we can say that she went to the forest and therefore she made her life bad. She was told not to go to the forest. She could have lived in the palace and Ram would have come back after 14 years and all would be good. She chose to go to the forest. That comes at a price. All choices come at a price. If you want your child to take decisions, you must teach them to take responsibility for all the things that can go wrong.
Right.
You want to be safe, you'll be in a prison all your life. Very safe. Because in the prison, you're protected. And I see a lot of those. That is Antahpur, na? Gehne todo, gehne banwao, as they said in this very famous film called Sahib Bibi aur Ghulam. That sit in the house, you have gold jewelries to make, nothing else to do, but you're safe and respected. And they do temples for you.
True.
Or take a risk.
Right.
Figure it out. You can't get everything in life. Who gets everything in life? Buddha has to walk away from his family to get nirvana, right?
Yeah.
He walks away. He's willing to give up Yashodhara. He's willing to give up Rahula. And we celebrate a man who walked away from his wife and child. But we disrespect the woman who walks away from her daughter and sons. Apsara on one side because she wants to have fun. But he's going for something noble, giving up his identity.
But we are also nurturers who will also worry about what we leave behind. We're not thinking singularly about ourselves. We're just wired that way.
Well, not the Apsara.
Yes, but I'm saying...
Who is this we?
It is because you are not everybody is that Apsara, Devdutt.
Yeah, I know. But you see, when you want that freedom, you have to... It's like going to the gym, right? It's horrible to go to the gym. Nobody likes going to the gym. In the same way, your brain has to be rewired. It's not going to be easy.
Yeah.
If you think going to the gym and developing a six-pack ab like those, models doing that, it is a lot of hard work. Why does the brain have to be easy to take decisions, to tell that I want to be single or I don't want to marry or I want to divorce or I want to have multiple boyfriends while being married?
Yeah.
All of them are difficult. No decision in life is easy. So we submit to the easiest of them, which others have taken, and follow the template.
Yeah.
That's a choice. I can always say that, that's my body's like that only. I'm wired that way. I cannot, and the gym instructor is looking at me and rolling his eyes and says, okay, fine.
You know what I love about you is that I can read feminist stories while I am teaching my kids about the book, the other one, which obviously the others that we've read. But this one, in my opinion, shows, which for everybody who's listening, it's ABC Hinduism for kids. And what makes it so beautiful is, and the first thought that I had when I read about the Sindhu Hindu and how you said drop the S, is like, how can someone who's so well-read, so learned, come down to being bare bones when he needs to explain it to a child? How do you simplify it so much? Like, I don't think, I mean, and I'm not obviously you, but simplifying it to this level for children is beautiful.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's a huge compliment. You see, what happens is, I believe if you understand something, you should be able to explain it to a child.
Right.
And it's difficult to talk to children because you have to go to their level, but you also want to raise them.
Yes.
So you have to challenge them. You are not going to give them something. If you give them exactly what they want, then you will give them stupid things. Because stupid things are always more attractive. Smart things are difficult.
Yeah.
As I said, gym. Remember the gym all the time. Nobody likes to go to the gym.
Yeah.
But we have to go to the gym as we grow, especially when we grow older, because we have to keep our body working. We will always prefer food.
I'm thinking you are thinking very hard about the gym. There is something that is happening here.
No, because the ease with which I can spend writing is not the same. I always wonder why I can't spend 45 minutes in a gym. It's such a big struggle for me. And that's a reminder of people who don't read books. Because what is a book? A book is a brain gym. So children want to read books which don't challenge them. And it's a parent's responsibility, like giving green vegetables to a child, that you have to read. And you have to read, because only then your neural networks will develop. Book, nature, travel, exercise, sport, all these things will make our children smart. But systematically, the smartest people in the world and the richest people in the world are funding activities to make our children dopamine addicts.
Right.
And we are allowing it. Very casually, without even realizing it. When you're writing for children, you're writing for the next generation. When you read the Hindu scriptures, they will say, half your life is for yourself, but the remaining half of your life is for others. I don't have children. But there are others. There's a whole generation. It's not my children. It's just children. There's another generation. And I want them to know about, there's more to Hinduism than what a politician will say, or what a Bollywood writer will say, or what a Guruji will say.
Thank God you had it all three.
So I have to write it in this modern, I illustrate, I write. So, A for apple, but what about A for Atma? How do you explain Atma to a 3-year-old child? Then you suddenly realize that in Hindi words, there are no, in Sanskrit, there's nothing which comes, for example, in Z. Z sound doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But then you put a zebu bull. And now you put a bull and a zebu, and it's a humped bull. And then you realize that humped bulls are only found in India. And, I try to tell children that, this is biology, this is chemistry. How is chemistry part of your life? How is biology part of your life? When you talk about plants, you talk about botany. So I realized that curiosity is what you have to get into children. When you make a child curious, they will start going towards books. It's not giving the books, it is creating the curiosity.
Right.
So I have had children, when I travel, they'll ask me, sir, I have read. I said, I don't know the answer. Let's find out together. I said, no, how will I find out? I said, you have a phone, you have Wi-Fi, and you don't know how to do search? Come, let's see who finds it first. So I gamify it. And then suddenly they get excited, because I'm like, sir, ye Buddhist stupa ka matlab kya hai? Once I went to NID about 10 years ago and had these people in Buddhist lectures. I said, get your phone, get your iPads, put the Wi-Fi on, let's do. And I kept telling them how to search, because they didn't know how to search. So these kids who think they know, I said, no, you don't know. Because if you can't answer the question, you don't know. The answer is there, and it's there in the World Wide Web. And then I started challenging them. And they started giving me the answers. And at the end of it, they were giving me lectures on Buddhism, history of Buddhism.
But it's all not first-hand information.
It's okay.
It's not a lived experience, and which is my concern. And I mean, of course, in mythology, it's not a lived experience.
How will you experience a disabled child's life?
No, you will not. But
You can read about it.
yes,
That is why books exist.
yes,
To experience the lived experience of other people. So I can empathize with a rape victim. I don't have to go through the horror of it, but I can empathize with it because I've read it. I don't have a woman's body, but because I've read feminist literature, I've read the women's writings.
So you're not worried that children today are living off lived experiences of others?
They have to live through. That is the purpose of it. But which lived experience are they living? How much are they being exposed to? What are they being exposed to? Most of them are being exposed to Harry Potter. That's not a lived experience. That's a fantasy.
Yeah.
Lived experience is to know about nature, plants, animals. Do they know about people who live in Dharavi?
Yeah.
Do they know? Have they traveled in a bus? Have they walked to the station? Have they crossed the road on their own without 3 maids taking care of them? And I keep seeing these fragile children being raised by rich people, and I'm like, oh my God, your children are going to grow fragile, which means they will be eaten by wolves when you're not there. You're just, I always tell people, in the old days, the king had a child, a prince or a princess, and his staff would do everything in their power to pamper the prince and princess, so they become weaker and weaker and weaker. And the moment the king goes away, the child has no one to take care of them. It's like they say the Nawab of Lucknow. There's an urban legend when they came to arrest him. He did not leave the room because he had no one to tie the nada of his pants. At least that's a story which I've heard. This is what we do to children. In protecting them, they don't even know how to tie the nada of their pants. And Nawab didn't know that. His ancestors would have been warriors from Northeast and killing people, massacring people. And their grandchild can't tie the nada of his pants. And that's what happens in privileged families.
Right.
And we don't allow children. So I once met this a princess. And I looked at the princess and I just asked her, do you know how to cook? And she didn't. I saw the flashing fire because there were 3. I could see what's going on in her head. I'm a woman, that's why he's asking to me about cooking. Second, I'm a princess. How dare he ask me? I have cooks. And I said, it's just a life skill. And I think that's the first question you should ask the man who you're going to marry.
Yeah.
And it dawned on her that I'm telling you more about experience. I said, it's about experience. Our books are about that. How do I help a child understand Atma?
Yeah.
If I don't give a book, we lived experience a child of 4-year-old, 6-year-old.
But are we saying that the children are going to follow suit and therefore the parent needs to be more aware about the ABCs than anything else?
So
Because we are believing that we don't need this anymore.
Yeah.
Because we are 21st century, because we're progressive, we don't need to go back, we need to look forward.
You see, all mythological stories talk about human insecurity. And no technology in the world is going to take that away.
Yeah.
So when you read an ABC of Hinduism for kids or any mythological books, these are stories about human insecurity.
Right.
And coping with human insecurity. You are insecure, your child will be insecure, your grandchild will be insecure. It's not going to go away. Every newborn child comes crying because it's insecure. You can't say the king's or the merchant's son is going to be born or daughter is going to be born who doesn't cry.
Right.
No technology is going to create a
Yeah.
child when the child is emerging from the mother's womb. It's just terrified. The world
Yeah.
has changed. So terror of life is there in every generation.
Right.
So stories are required in every generation. Therefore, mythological books. And we are helping our children.
Yeah.
So I would always tell, do not teach don't give food to your child. Teach your child how to cook the food.
Right.
Because then they are forever taken care of. Because they know how to manage the show. Savithri could manage. Because she said, I can manage death.
Yeah.
So they describe Savithri as an educated woman, by the way. She was so educated that men were afraid to marry her. And she said, I'll find my own husband. And when she finds a husband, they said that he's going to die. And she said, I'll manage that too. So you see, this is a story written 2000 years ago. I'm sure she read ABC Hinduism for Kids because someone told her that, life is going to have full of challenges. Things that you like may not work out your way.
Yeah.
And you have to figure out how to do it. And I think when you write a book, when I'm like, for example, when we're designing the cover, I don't know if you see the cover, there is this goddess over here called Zari Mari. Now, have you heard of Zari Mari?
Jari Mari temple. Which
Yes. This is a Bombay person talking. A non-Bombay may not know. And my Delhi editor said, but I've never heard of Zari Mari. I said, great. You should now read it. She said, oh, that's so true. That's the purpose of a book, to tell me things that I've never thought of before.
Yeah.
I said, if I tell you the thing that you already know, then what's the point of a book?
Yeah.
So I insisted that Zari Mari be on top, not Hanuman, because everybody knows Hanuman and everybody knows Ganesha. But they said, no, we need to put the familiar. I said, put the familiar, put the unfamiliar. So the child starts to learn the unfamiliar.
Right.
So ABC is familiar, but the words are not familiar.
Yeah.
And that was very, very important. It is a very big challenge. How do you explain? Like, I put all kinds of birds and animals. I love to put all birds. I love animals and birds.
I love the illustrations.
Yeah.
How much time do you spend on getting that illustration right, that it's matching what you actually want to communicate?
So an illustration like this will take 1 minute. I love doodling. So they're really doodles. I don't color them. Coloring is done by another person.
Yeah.
I'm not good at coloring. So I take professionals' help for that. But the drawing is mine, and I draw very fast usually. All my illustrations in my book are black and white. And I have this thing about drawing them very fast. And now with the iPad, it's easier.
Yeah.
So I don't take a long time to draw. I've been doing now for like 20 years of illustrations. So unless it's a very complex composition, but not more than 10 minutes.
Wow.
10
Then
minutes.
that means that picture is so clear in your head.
Yeah, I'm very clear. That I thank God for that. But over the years, I think clarity is something that and it gets refined every time. It's not like a single point. It clarifies and it gets better and better and better and better over the years. So that's why I'm able to write the children's book now. Initially, I couldn't. When I wrote Boys Who Fought, Girls Who Chose, it's because I knew the Ramayana Mahabharata so well that I could slice and dice it. And it's still tough books. They're not easy books, really. Many people have said they're not children's book. I said, I'm not giving children what they already know.
Exactly. It forced us to think.
I want the
It
parent.
gave us perspective.
And I want the parent and the child, when they're sitting together, I want the child to go and tell, I didn't understand this. And I want the parent to read it and explain. And please
And they can have a difference of opinion.
And
We did.
And that's where magic happens. In the conversation between the parent and child.
Right.
I want my books to facilitate a parent and child. Like, imagine if three of you all, a husband and wife discussing a book will improve the relationship between the husband and wife.
Yeah.
Because you see, he sees it differently.
Yeah.
I see it different. Now you understand the difference between the two of you.
Right.
Or two friends discussing the same, or a film. So I think a book provokes you very intensely on certain topics, which films can't do unless it's difficult to do a film, or films can do it at a particular way.
Yeah.
But you can't get into the inner world.
Right.
Books allow you to enter the mind of people.
Sans the
can't.
visual. The visualization is left to yourself.
Yeah. In a film, I can't, unless they show a background sound telling how they're thinking.
Yeah.
It's really the good acting of a person.
Yeah.
So it's a very different medium. But why I do illustrations is because I want the person to also visualize. So the brain develops through text and through design.
Yeah.
It's a combination.
Yes.
So I'm working a lot on cognitive thinking. The design plays a lot of role for me, designing a book.
But tell me, in this space, we're talking of comparison, greed, and this constant rat race or hamster wheel that we want to be in. Any concluding stories that you want to share which we can teach our children from mythology?
So let's go to ABC in Hinduism and go to a character called EFGHI, which is Indra. And Indra is the king. Indra is the king of Devas. The Devas live in the sky, in Swarg, where there is the wish-fulfilling tree Kalpataru, the wish-fulfilling cow Kamadhenu, the wish-fulfilling jewel Chintamani, the nectar of immortality Amrut. The Asuras who live under the earth in Patal keep attacking Swarg and demanding a portion of what the Devas have. For the Devas and the Asuras are half brothers, sons of the same father and different mothers. The Devas refuse to share. They defeat the Asuras with the help of Shiva, Vishnu or Devi. But the Asuras always return. Because the Asuras have Sanjeevani Vidya, a secret by which the dead can be regenerated. As a result, and that's important, as a result, Indra's Swarga has prosperity. No, but the point is, Indra is the person who has all the money in the world, but he's unhappy. So whenever I meet someone who's rich and prosperous, I always, because happiness has nothing to do with your wallet size.
Right.
Happiness is Atmagyan, knowledge, wisdom. The sages of India have always said, Atmagyan hoga to sukh hoga. They have never said Lakshmi se sukh aati hai.
Right.
Lakshmi is good for comfort. She gives you great comfort. She's joy, delight, pleasure. But peace of mind comes from Atmagyan. And that's what I focus on.
Thank you. This is incredible. I cannot believe I have spent 1.5 hours with you and I'm just so excited.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for writing these books. You have absolutely no idea the impact that you create, the family bonds that you build, the conversations that happen, the fights that happen, the difference in perspectives that you kind of ignite in our families. And please keep writing and please get us to think. I think that is my big takeaway from each of your books, Devdutt. You've taught us how to think.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thank you so much.
For parenting tips, celebrity interviews, recipes, conversations with experts, DIYs, and lots more. Subscribe to Kidsstoppress now.